Right. In this video, we are going to talk a little bit about the DNA of the piece, how it is constructed. We're going to talk about the tonalities that we have that kind of juxtapose one another, that being E flat major and an octatonic scale. And so let's get into it. All right. So in front of us, we have an E flat major scale. This is not new information. We play this every day. We play F, B flat, E flat. This is the third scale that we play. Go label each note, these pitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Not complicated, right? And inside of this, we have, well, let's listen to that real quick. Here's an E flat major scale. Whoops. Pretty straightforward. If we highlight and play only, whoops. Sorry, still getting used to this material. Let's maybe I'll just use this. If we play 1, 3, 5, we get an E flat major chord, and that major chord is the basis in which everything is kind of sitting on. All right, we call this E flat a pedal point throughout. An octatonic scale, all right, or sometimes known as the diminished scale. So we call this octatonic. And it's octatonic because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we would start back at 1. So this would be 9 or 1. And that's because this pitch is the same as our first. The last pitch and the first pitch are the same, so they don't get really usually a unique number. Usually just an octave, right? And these are separated by different a whole step and half step pattern. If we go back up to the C major scale, right? Maybe we learned this before and we've talked about it perhaps, but this is between these first two pitches is a whole step. Here's a half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and half step. Anytime you use that pattern, you're going to get a major scale. Doesn't matter what pitch. Here on an octatonic scale, there are two different kinds. There's half whole and whole half, but we're going to see how, it looks like there's a part of my accidental is missing. There we go. We're going to see how this pattern lies out and how we got to this, this sound of notes. B flat to E natural is a half step. E to F sharp is a whole step. F sharp to G is a half step. G to A is a whole step. A to B flat is a half step. B flat to C is a whole step. C to D flat is a half step. And D flat to E flat is a whole step. That gives us a very unique and different sound. Here we go. Very different. I'm going to play that one more time. And that is the basis in which this piece of music, that tonality, that scale, is where a lot of the motivic development is strived from. In fact, our first really, the melody itself comes directly out of the pattern that starts on G of this scale. So right here and goes up to there. That's the grouping of notes or the pitch class that is essentially creates the melody. And you'll hear this. All right, we'll come back to that in just a second. So the other thing I want to point out, though, is we talked about this E flat major chord, right? 1, 3, 5. Those notes, that DNA is still a part of this sound, right? E flat, G, and B flat, right? We can see that they're still here, but they're separated by different notes. E flat to G, whoops. E flat to G, and G to B flat. So it's still in there. Let's get to our melody. All right, the melody is constructed out of these 5 notes: G, A, B. It's got a cool crunch to it, right? And when we alter just one note, we get this sound. So I don't know. I'm not Mr. Borma, or Dr. Borma rather, but I would imagine that there is some playfulness going into this and trying to figure out sounds or a sound you liked. And all right, and then there's 5 beats. So what's a unique time signature that shows up in the score at one point? 5/4, right? Yeah. Well, that's because this melody itself has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beats to it. But we don't get that conclusion, right, all together until we've explored this, because often what's happening is the melody is written in 4/4 time, right? And so the melody is starting on 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's usually a bar line here, which makes this a 1. So let's go to our music now and see if that's true. Let's take a look at that piano here. All right. So here we have our melody. 1 and 2 and 4 and 1. Then it starts again on 2. 2 and 3 and 4 and 2. I'm sorry. 2 and 3 and 1 and 2. 3 and 4 and 2 and 3. 4 and 1 and 2 and 4. 1. And we're back to the cycle. And then part of what makes this sound like, texture that's really intertangling itself, tangled is maybe a really good word to describe this. It's because we had Dr. Borma enters all these voices, and this creates that melody and layers it in kind of a round, right? So then we have use purple here. Oboes enter on, whoops, I wrote 1. That should be 3, right? So the flute just started their melody on 3 or 2. Oboe now starts on 3. And they play through 3 and 4 and 2 and 3. Then they start again on 4. And then the motive starts again on 1. And then on 2. And then on 3, etc. Clarinets come in on beat 2. 2 and 3 and 1 and 2. 3 and 4 and 2 and 3. 4 and 1 and 2. 4 and 1 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and same thing, right? The saxophones follow suit. Here we start on 1, and then you start your melody over again on 2. So this whole section is based off of just this sound. But it continues to loop in and run into each other, right? So now let's see if we can let's listen to this and follow along. All right, hopefully we're back. All right, let's listen to this. Starts with letter C. So there's a little music in front here, and we'll try and follow along the best I can. We're going to listen to that again, but this time um, the sound quality is probably going to get a little bit worse, but I'm going to slow it down so you can try and follow along just a little bit better.